So we're getting ready to start, but I was asked to make a quick announcement before we do. For those of you that don't know, if it's your first time here like me, the bathrooms, I'm told, are on the mezzanine level. So if we have a really moving experience together, or if I just say something so funny you feel like you're going to wet your pants, the mezzanine is where you're going to want to go. Okay, so we got that announcement out of the way. We'll jump to it. Today we're going to talk about digital marketing strategy for 2019. So here's the problem. As we sit here having this conversation today, it's already August, and many of you don't even know what you're doing for Q4, let alone 2019. And so one thing that we try to do at Fidelitas, and I'll talk more about who the heck I am and what we do in a minute, but what we try to do is we try to figure out what's coming next, and we try to stay ahead of it without jumping on every gimmick known to man. How many of you have a business Snapchat account that you no longer use? Probably goes right next to the Vine on the shelf in your marketing closet, right? So, yep. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today is just the overall strategy and being more intentional about what you're doing and why. And hopefully you all have some great takeaways to come from this. And there's no time like now to get everything in order for 2019. Summer's a great time to really get into your strategic planning and to sort out what you're going to tackle. And that's really a big part of how we operate at our agency is we focus on a process called StratOp. And StratOp is from a guy named Tom Patterson, and he perfected this process called the Patterson process. And what he found was, and he's consulted some really big companies. He consulted Ford when they didn't take money from the government during the bailout. He consulted Boeing when they came out with the 777 Dreamliner. And he consulted the US government back in the 80s when the Japanese were kicking our butts in car manufacturing, which I know in this part of the country hits a little bit closer to home than others. And what he found was when the Japanese were doing so much better than the United States in car manufacturing back in the 80s, he found that the Japanese solve problems very differently than we do. In Japanese culture, when you solve a problem going from point A to point B, in America, we just go from point A to point B as quickly as possible. We want the quickest, easiest, most efficient solution that's going to produce the best results. Well, maybe best results, just results, right? It's about checking the boxes. In Japan, they actually go halfway from point A to point B, and then they circle in on the best result rather than any result. And that's a big difference. And so that's a big part of how we try to operate our agency and how we consult our clients. And that's one of the key takeaways I want to give you all today is how to be more strategic with your planning, what's coming, what you can own, what maybe you need to give up, and hone your focus a little bit more. And again, my name is Tyler Sickmeyer from Fidelitas Development out in San Diego. Y'all were nice enough / crazy enough to fly me in for this. So I am happy to be here with you all today. And I actually got my start. I started the agency 10 years ago, but before that, I was in Christian concert promotion of all things. And what I got my start in with concert promotion, I really became known for two things. One, I was the first Christian promoter to use text message marketing as a tool. This is back, and again, I was doing this when I was 18, 19 years old in college. And I was also the first one to use Facebook. And some of you may have a wrinkled eyebrow at me like, was this guy really the first one to use Facebook? And I'll tell you why I was. It was because I was the only college kid that they were dumb enough to sell these national arena shows to. So at the time, Facebook was only open to college students, so I'm competing with Live Nation and all these other big promoters for these arena shows. Well, I was the only one in college. So we were first to the game for that. And so that's how we got our start, and it was the ability to jump on some trends early that were the right trends that led us to where we are today running Fidelitas. And again, we see more trends like that coming now. It's a great time. It's been a while since there's truly been some new technology or new strategies that really move the needle. It's kind of been rinse and repeat. Yeah, you modify your Facebook strategy, and I know you guys learned all about algorithms earlier today, which is awesome. And there's a lot of things you can do to continue refining your approach. But right now, there's actually more new options entering the market than ever before. So it's mission critical that you're really intentional about what you're doing and why. And so as we look to move into 2019, there's three challenges that every marketer in here has to overcome when it comes to your marketing strategy and figuring out where to focus on. And by the way, I am a huge fan of GIFs and memes. So if nothing else, I hope to entertain you that way today. My personal goal is to break PowerPoint. So if I don't do that, I have failed. So the first challenge is that we have too much time spent on completing tasks and not enough time spent on the strategy. How many of you have a task management software that you use? I know we do here at Fidelitas. We use one that's actually designed for creatives called Rike, W-R-I-K-E. And by the way, I'm going to mention a lot of software and tools and stuff today. I'm not giving out affiliate links, or I don't have any agenda promoting what I promote. I just promote what we use because we know it works, right? So just so you all know where we're coming from, there's no enter promo code Tyler to save 10% like you might hear in a podcast liner. So just so you know. But with task management software, it's so easy, and our team fights this too. I have to remind them, your goal on the day-to-day is not to check the boxes. It's not to just get as much stuff off your plate and shoved onto a teammates or completed as possible. It's to drive results. It's to generate ROI for the clients, right? And sometimes I think we can all lose sight of that, especially in marketing, because I bet regardless of whether you're in the education sector, B2B, B2C, no matter where you sit, whether you're the CEO or CMO or marketing manager, or maybe it's your first day and they sent you to this conference for training, good luck. If that's the case, your marketing team is probably 1 to 2 people shy of what you need it to be, no matter how big it is. Whether you're the only person or whether you're a team of 10 or 20, it's the same situation. And if you have an agency, that maybe you need another agency, or maybe the scope isn't big enough. So you've got them handling X, they really need to be handling X, Y, and Z for you, but you know you just can't afford it, right? So every marketer in here has the same challenge, which is not enough resources for what they're trying to accomplish. And so you fall into task completion. It's like whack-a-mole. We're just going to do everything somewhat well without doing anything really well. The second challenge is the failure to integrate teams across multiple disciplines for better results. And that is a mouthful, but here's what it boils down to. We all have silos in our organizations. You know, the left hand's not talking to the right hand, and that's a competitive advantage that we've seen at Fidelitas. And for you other agencies in here listening in, this is a competitive advantage for you if you can figure it out and take advantage of it. Too many times, you don't have teams that run social talking to teams that run PR, that run SEO, that run your web dev, etc. So you don't have the left hand talking to the right hand and better results. And we're going to do a deep dive into one of the most profitable integrations for you here today. And the third challenge is tracking ROI in a meaningful way across all the channels. So too often we get stuck on Vanity Metrics, or hey, here's the automated report from HubSpot or from Google Analytics, and it says we did good, so we did good. And that's as far as it gets. And that's no way to operate. So at the end of the day, we've got to make sure we measure what actually matters to the client. And we'll dive into that here towards the end of today as well. So let's get to the first challenge, which is spending too much time checking boxes and not enough time on the results. Again, like we just talked about, we're task-driven. And the problem when you're task-driven is you don't get the results you want. So I know all of you got one of these earlier, but how many of you would like caramel corn? Maybe everyone's still a little hungry from lunch. Maybe they're like, I could just use that little extra dessert. Well, I have good news for you, because I'm going to open up this bag, start here in the front, and everyone can take one kernel and pass it around, and maybe by the time it gets to the end, there'll be enough for one person, right? Well, bad news. That's not really going to make an impact for anybody. We may have covered all the bases. Everyone may have got something. But at the end of the day, we didn't get any results. No one is satisfied from one kernel. If anything, maybe now you're just a little more thirsty and still hungry, or you realize just how hungry you are, right? So instead of that, I'm just going to give one person this bag of popcorn. Kudos to the man with the bow tie game there in the middle. That's for you. So on that note, let's keep going. But I hope that drives home the point a little bit again. You can't spread yourself too thin. As marketers, we have to be strategic about where we spend our time, because I know most of you would like to have a life outside of work. And again, when we focus on the stuff that doesn't matter, we lose sight of the stuff that does. And so really, again, it starts from taking that strategic approach early and really honing in on what's gonna drive the results. And again, it's a less is more mentality. You know, that's one thing we talk about with all of our clients, is figuring out what channels actually matter, what channels are going to make a difference when it comes to the bottom line. And so we're going to show you how to reverse engineer the bottom line here towards the end. But it starts with how you focus your time. And the other thing, when I talk about focus, I talk about the overarching focus of building brand loyalty, because that's what we want at the end of the day. The cheapest customer to retain is the one that you already have. You should be spending a good chunk of your budget and your time. And when I talk about budget, it's not just resources, it's time, it's effort. Figure out ways you can surprise and delight your current customers and clients rather than figuring out how to go get new ones. The biggest opportunity for you is to upsell your current customers, the people that already love you, respect you, appreciate you, and shop you on the regular. Those people have already voted with their wallets that you're important to them. So figure out how to make them important to you and to show that. Next up, you want to make sure you give your fans a reason to stay engaged. And we talk about building brand loyalty. You want to give people a reason to follow your brand. We always talk about when people follow you on Facebook, unless it's your family member that did it out of the kindness of their heart because you requested them to do it like 5 times and then you brought it up in a text and then you brought it up at the family reunion that they still hadn't liked your page, so now they like your page. Unless that's the case, they followed you because they want value out of the relationship. They perceived that they were going to receive value from engaging with you in a social platform. How many of you are going to go home, or maybe some of you are even checked out in here already? I'm looking at you there in the back. How many of you are checked out already? You're already on Facebook and you're saying, man, I'm trying to find something more interesting than this guy up here in a pink shirt talking. I wonder if I can find an advertisement on Facebook. If that's really more interesting, ouch. But the challenge with that is, again, no one goes onto the social platform to see an advertisement or to see a brand. What they want is they want value. They want entertainment value. They want the value of knowing what their friends and family are doing. They want to learn something. They want to discover something new. Why do you think those nature accounts always do so well? I mean, anyone can get sucked into an account about animals anytime, right? Like, oh, I didn't know that this African beetle fights for its dominance and does all this other stuff, right? Like, you could go down a whole rabbit hole and all of a sudden you're 20 minutes into a video on beetles. And that's Facebook. That's social media, right? That's value. It's not what people went there looking for, but it's what they found and it was valuable to them and that it helped them kill time and they were entertained and educated in the moment. And so for brands, how do you do that? And it all comes back to reverse engineering what we call the WIFM factor. WIFM stands for what's in it for me. And really that's what you have to look for with everything you put out. What's the WIFM factor, not for you, but for your customers when you put something out. If we're talking about social channels or an email blast, that's one thing we often get asked by our clients, well, how often should we send an email? And the answer is as often as you can provide value. We've got clients that send 5 days a week. We've got clients that send once a month. Both are fine as long as you can provide value in what you're sending. If you can't provide value in 1 email a month, you shouldn't even do that, right? So figure out who you're talking to and why they should pay attention to you and provide value that way. And again, like we talked about, it's just offering value to your customers across the board. So sometimes that's going to be that's going to be a discount. It may be exclusive access to a new product. It may be exclusive insights. It may be a behind-the-scenes look at how you make your product. There's all sorts of stuff you could feature that's going to add value and better educate people and build brand loyalty. But just putting up a Happy Friday post is not going to cut the mustard. And finally, for you B2B brands in here, please, please, please take the white papers out back and shoot them. How many of you have at least 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 20 white papers on your desktop that you maybe had every intention to reading when you downloaded it, but you never seem to get around to it because it goes back to that first problem. There's not enough hours in the day. I'm no different. I have probably 50 white papers on this laptop that I downloaded with the best of intentions of reading at one point or another. I'm pretty sure I've got some 2016 trends on there from somebody that I could go pull up if I wanted to do a little scavenger hunt. But the problem is they don't drive results. Yeah, you got my email address because I traded you my contact information in return for the download, but I didn't get any value out of it. So look for other ways to engage. Video, by the way, is a great replacement for a white paper because it actually takes less time to produce. You can do it somewhat casually. You can even shoot on an iPhone and then just put a little bit of nice editing on the front end and back end of it and provide the same value in that. But people will sit there and watch a video because they can multitask while they watch a video versus sitting down and reading a white paper. It's the same reason why Audible is outpacing book sales across the board. People prefer audiobooks over reading an actual book by a ratio of 4 to 1 now. So if people want to, and that's why podcasts are doing so well too. So again, take advantage of that. Take advantage of the fact that you can be flexible and accessible with your content for your users at the end of the day, and give them a reason to stay engaged with you. And again, regardless of the medium you're driving the content home in, if you're not excited about the content, chances are your customer's not going to be either. So again, that goes back to the whole checking the box mentality. Please do not just put out content for the sake of saying, oh, well, we got a video out. Great, but you didn't say anything valuable in 10 minutes, and people all clicked off of it within 30 seconds. And by the way, that's another little tidbit for you if you're going to dive into the world of video. You have about 8 seconds to capture someone's attention, for better or worse. In 8 seconds, you can either capture them for the whole thing or lose them for the whole thing real quick. And again, the other thing when it comes to content, you want to focus on being on message and on tone. These are two of the more overlooked aspects of it. Especially you'll see this when you outsource your content. A lot of times, and that's really what separates a great agency from a bad agency, is their ability to identify your brand's tone and how to execute that in a way that sounds like you. So if the brand is if the brand, for example, one of our clients in the sporting goods sector is a firearms manufacturer that we produce social content for, we have to speak all about Second Amendment rights, we have to speak about accessories, we have to speak about safety, we have to speak about personal defense, all these things that matter to them, but we need to speak about it in a way that's authentic to the sector, because if we don't, they're going to sniff out that fakeness in a second, and our client is toast, not to mention we're toast at that point. So regardless of what you promote or what you sell or what angle you have, make sure that you are very clear on the tone and the messaging. Too often I've seen, you can always tell when a brand has a new intern take over the social accounts. Because it looks like it was written by a college student. It probably was written by a college student. And you can tell when there's a big difference between, and this is a challenge with interns, and no offense to interns, we have a bunch on our team. They're great, and it's awesome to give them an opportunity to learn. But when you just turn everything over to an intern, and they're there for 6 months at a time, by month 5 or 6, they've started to get into a rhythm, which that's what we see for agency-client relationships anyways, is it usually takes about 5 to 6 months to get into a rhythm. Our stated goal is 3 months. We want to try to cut that in half before we're really operating on all cylinders with a client. But it's the same way for interns. So they've got 5 or 6 months, and at that point they're getting the hang of it. The client's happy with the content, and then they leave. And then you've got a fresh face all over again. So it's this never-ending cycle of mediocre content that gets good, and then it gets mediocre again. So keep that in mind, and make sure, and again, we'll talk about brand standards guides in a minute, but make sure you really hammer home what your messaging and tone are. And if you're not sure, if all this has you kind of have your head spinning a little bit, and you're not sure what the heck to offer your customers at the end of the day, make sure you ask. One of the best tools in a marketer's tool chest, and this is going to be huge in 2019, it's huge now, except for the fact that most people still aren't taking advantage of it. I do think there'll be audience fatigue at some point, because once you have 50 brands a week asking you for your insights and opinion, you're not going to care anymore. But right now it's still novel and new enough that it's, oh, Clorox actually wants to know what I think about their product. Well, I'll tell them. And again, like that, it goes back to Malcolm Gladwell's book, if you've ever read The Tipping Point, which should be mandatory reading for anyone in marketing. He talks about the 3 types of people that matter. They're informants, connectors, and mavens. And he talks about, he uses Dove soap as an example. So they have a number on the back of each bar of soap. It says, questions, comments, call 1-800-DOVE soap, or whatever the number is. Think about this for a second. How many of you have ever had a question or comment about your soap? It's soap. It's very self-explanatory. But obviously people do, or they wouldn't spend the money to keep that customer line open and print it on their packaging. They put some other messaging on there. And those people that call in about soap are the soap mavens. Those are the most passionate Dove soap customers. And that's their opportunity to connect with them. So figure that out. Who are your mavens? And then how can you connect with them? It might be as simple as, especially if you're a small business, a lot of times they'll be blown away to get FaceTime with senior leadership. So if you're the owner or CEO or VP, bring them in, get your other senior leaders to come in and sit in and listen to them. Buy them pizza and drinks and hang out with them for an hour and just ask what they think about stuff. You'll be surprised the type of insights that you get that your team will never see, because they're too close to the product and the service that you're offering. The second challenge is integrating teams across multiple disciplines for better results. And we could go in a lot of different we could go down a lot of different paths about how to integrate and what to integrate, but I want to start with one of the most important and potentially most profitable for all of you all as we head into 2019, and that's integrating your PR and SEO teams. A lot of times it's ironic, and I think part of the reason this is such a pain point is these are two of the most outsourced functions on a marketing team. Many of you often will have an SEO agency, and then you'll have a PR agency. Rarely do you have the same thing, because if you go back and you look at it, most PR agencies have branched into social media and other digital marketing. Sometimes they even have someone on their staff that's AdWords certified. Rarely do they go down the technical rabbit hole to bring in someone that is an SEO, because it's such a different skill set to train and hire and manage. And it's very different. And likewise on the SEO side, if you look at the majority of SEO shops, they're founded by someone that was very good at SEO, got more clients than they could handle, and then all of a sudden they've got an agency on their hands, whether they like it or not. And again, they're very technical driven. They're very sound at the SEO side, but PR is a very different skill set. So rarely do you see the two under one house. I mean, heck, even at Fidelitas, we've been around 10 years. We didn't bring PR in-house until about a year and a half ago, when we saw the writing on the wall for this, and we saw the opportunity that was there to get these two sides talking to each other for clients. And so we brought it in-house then. But even then, like I said, 15% of our existence, we've had both of these in-house. So you will find it, but it is rare to find both of them in-house at an agency. And if you have them both in-house, if you're a bigger organization, that's great, but chances are they're still not talking to each other like they could, and that's where you have your silos up inside your own organization. So the first thing we want to talk about is getting them on the same page with aligned brand messaging. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I want to talk to you about brand standards guides and why those matter so much. How many of you, just out of curiosity, have a brand standards guide of some sort? Uh-oh. That is about 30% of you. So the other 70% of you definitely need one. And here's the thing. North Face's brand standards guide is 52 pages long. You don't need a 52-page brand standards guide, but you do need to identify much beyond, and a lot of times the brand standards guide starts and stops at the logo treatment, but you need to go beyond that and beyond what your font is. It needs to include your tone, your messaging, like we alluded to earlier, your mission, vision, values, and those aren't outwardly facing. I'm a big proponent of Jim Collins and Patrick Lencioni's thoughts on internal culture, and those aren't meant to be outwardly facing, but your mission, vision, values should shape how your employees act with each other and with your customers and clients. And so that needs to be a part of your brand standards guide, because that affects the messaging. It affects what type of customer experience someone can expect to have when they do business with you. And also, you want to make sure that you leverage the SEO insights to hone your PR team's focus. And again, this is where having the left hand talking to the right hand can really start to pay dividends. With PRs, I mean, I'll use one of our clients as an example. We work with a company called Jackery, which makes portable power banks for cell phones and laptops and such. And with Jackery, those products are not cheap. They start at like 30, 40 bucks and go all the way up to 500 bucks. And we get hit up for product demo requests all the times for random blogs and outlets. And sometimes it's easy, it's clear cut, like, oh, the New York Times or Men's Journal wants to do a product review. Awesome. We'll send you out a product, and we can't wait to see it. That's awesome. Other times we get random blogs we've never heard of or stuff that may be popular in a niche, but we don't know. And that's where we turn to SEO insights to figure out whether or not we should send them product or even take the time to have senior leadership do an interview with them. So, and I don't want to speak over anyone's head here. Show of hands, how many of you don't, or I'll make it easier, how many of you do know what domain authority is when I start talking about that? Okay, cool, so about half of you. So for the other half of you, in SEO, there's a term called domain authority. Very long story short, it's a scale of 0 to 100. Google is 100. The Nigerian prince that keeps trying to get you to sign up, his website would be 0. Okay? And so you've got the two ends of the spectrum. On average, most of your sites are probably going to be in the 40s. If it's in the 20s, find someone here that does SEO and get them to help you immediately. If you're above 40, you're on the right track. But typically about 40 is what we see as average for brand sites. But to oversimplify link building and how that works, we're basically, as an SEO agency, we're looking for opportunities for our clients to secure links from sites that have a higher domain authority than our client. So if our client is ranked 40, we're looking for sites with a domain authority of 50, 60, 70, 80 to link to our client. to help them out with their SEO, because Google does consider credibility by association, right? You know, it's that old rule, birds of a feather flock together. So the more sites that you can associate with that are on the right track, the better off you are. Coming full circle with that to PR, if we point the PR team in the right direction as far as what to target and who to pursue coverage with, you know, there might be some little hole-in-the-wall blogs, but maybe the domain's 20 years old and they've got a decent following, and Google really values that site as an expert on a certain topic. That could be really valuable to get, even though it's not a fancy publication or channel to pursue. And so it's really, and otherwise there are also other sites that look really flashy and look nice, but they don't have any SEO value whatsoever. So that's why it's so important to make sure that we have our SEO teams and our PR teams talking to each other around around the content that's being put out. And by the way, this is one of our favorite GIFs. You just got to watch it for the whole bit to take it in and appreciate it. A little bit off the mark. So it's very important. If you can't see that in the back, that's in the arrow is about 10 feet off of the target in some sort of professional competition. So, and you too could be making that face if you aim for the wrong PR, the wrong publications for coverage for your brand. And again, there's industry publications that matter. There's bigger stuff that everyone loves to get because it's an ego boost, but what's going to move the needle for you at the end of the day and produce an ROI? And that's what we want to focus on with our work. Also, from a PR standpoint, you can leverage keyword strategy from the SEOs for better results. Many of you, I'm sure there are a handful of you in here that as a marketing manager, you are responsible for SEO, PR, social media, the PPC campaigns, the website, and the printer copier, right? So yeah, I see a couple of hands going up in the back, absolutely. So for those of you, many times as far as you get on the PR front, if you even get to touch it, is you get a press release out. And you can put a press release out on a variety of wires. I can tell you PR Newswire is a little pricier, but it's very valuable from an SEO standpoint if you're going to put something out on the wire. So PR Newswire is good. We use, most of the time when budget's restricted, we use PR Underground ourselves. It's another effective one. But when you're putting something out on the wire, if you don't know how that works, everything that you put out is picked up. A lot of times media outlets will literally just copy paste your press release into the publication. So for example, like TV stations and radio stations will populate their news site on their websites. Their news sections will come with whatever they just picked up off the wire. No one's writing and reporting anything. You know, heck, I mean, even bigger publications, the New York Times laid off half its editorial staff just last week, right? So with that happening and press releases being copy-pasted, it's very important that you use the right keywords. So for example, going back to Jackery, there's a big difference in search volume between portable power bank and portable charging station and portable battery pack. So again, making sure that we use the right language in the press releases can make a big difference to the SEO strategy with keyword penetration and links back to the site, because a lot of those links come from the press releases. And we talk about link building for a second, because that is an incredibly valuable tool. And really, when we look at SEO for 2019, your on-page SEO is really table stakes. It should not be hard at all to get someone to handle your on-page SEO and make sure that you have fast load times and a great customer experience and your tags right. That's simple to do, or not. I don't want to say simple and discredit anyone that does it, but that's like table stakes for SEO. The tough part, or the part that really kind of separates the varsity from the junior varsity, is someone's ability to go out and build links, because that's the one constant. As Google has continually changed their algorithm and continues to change their algorithm, links matter, and so and relevant links from quality sites matter. So that's where we, again, like we talked about, pursuing the right targets. Well, most SEOs come from a technical background. They're not set to be on the phone 24/7, just dialing, trying to get the right people to pick up and make links happen, right? So that's where a PR person comes in that has the relationships built. They can call and get stuff done a little bit faster. For example, maybe your brand is mentioned in a news article, and the SEO noticed, hey, we've got a brand mentioned, but we didn't get a followed link out of this, so there's no value in it for the SEO team. So the PR team can say, great, we're going to call up, we'll get them to do us a solid, and they'll get a followed link put in there for the brand. So now all of a sudden, something that the SEO probably couldn't have got done because they didn't know the right people, and they would have got stuck at the front desk at the newspaper. The PR probably has the journalist's cell phone number, and they can just call up and get a quick favor done. That's why it's so valuable to have your teams working together across multiple disciplines. And one more thing about the press release. I kind of alluded to the press releases go out everywhere. Well, they don't just go to places you want them to go. They go to anyone that wants to pick them up. So what that means is it's very important for the PRs in the room, make sure you let your SEO teams know when you're putting something out on the wire, because chances are you're going to pick up a couple toxic links here and there from less than savory sites that decide to put up your press release, because again, they're populating content too. And so when you have these sites with low domain authority linking back to your site, Google's going to think you did it intentionally and they'll penalize you for it. That's why it's very important to go in and disavow the bad links. And I know there's an update that Google claims, that the toxic links don't matter as much anymore. Every test we have done, every test we have seen, everyone else we have talked to in the industry is all seeing the same thing. The toxic links still matter. It's a grave mistake if you're not disavowing the toxic links from your Google Search Console. I want to talk about amplifying your content as well with the help of your PR team. Again, the PR team can hustle for placement. So this is one of the biggest things that SEO struggle with. You get content put together for guest articles, and that's awesome. But a lot of times they struggle getting it out to the right places. The PR team can really help with that because, again, they'll know, like, hey, here's the angle we can take. We're going to take off the name of this marketing manager from the article. It's now going to be ghostwritten by the CEO because that carries more weight. So the PR team will be able to jump in and help get your content placed more effectively. So keep that in mind as well. It's really important to get these two disciplines to talk to each other more. Another thing when it comes to content is infographics, pitching just different forms of content. And I touched on this a little bit earlier as far as the type of content that you're putting out. This is also a great replacement for a white paper if you're not comfortable doing video. Use this example from REI, for example. This is their sustainability, this is their stewardship report. This stewardship report probably could have been 1,000 words of dribble that no one would ever read. Instead, it's an eye-catching infographic that's easily digestible in about 2.5 minutes. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you put out your content in a format that people actually want to read and will care about. Again, the whiff 'em factor. This is where it comes into play. And if you wanted to take it one step further, don't just do the infographic, but have a video. We'll use this example. Have a video from the CEO of REI sit there and chat about, hey, this is what we did. Here's what's important to us. Here's how we're making a difference. And here's what we're going to do next. And thank you so much for being a part of REI. Okay? It could be a very simple 2-minute video that just enhances that content and takes it to another level. And that makes it easier for press coverage too, because now there's a direct quote from the CEO that they can include. Again, so the more that you put out in digestible formats, the better off you're going to be across disciplines when it comes to content. And one last little bit of content strategy for 2019 as we look ahead. We've seen a lot of success with that this year, but again, this is something that a lot of people haven't jumped on yet, and that is refreshing past content. So if you have content, for example, one piece that's done really well for Fidelitas, we've got a blog called Your Complete Guide to Email Marketing for 2017. We're in the process of rewriting that. It's going to basically adding a couple points, adding some new software that's been discovered since then, refreshing a few things, and then it's going to come out Your Complete Guide to Email Marketing for 2019. And that'll come out probably at some point next month. Again, it's more relevant, it's ahead of the curve, and again, instead of having to recreate 2,500 words from scratch, we're going in and just optimizing our current content, which is a much easier way to do it. Okay, so keep that in mind too. You all have old blogs that no one has read since 2016 or before when they were published. What can you do to go in and refresh them, make them more in depth, and really take advantage of it? And by the way, when we're talking about content, if you have blogs that are old and you're going to refresh that were like 1,000 words or 500 words from back in the era when you just pounded out as many 500-word blogs as you could to get results, try instead to expand them to more like 2,000 words. And we actually call it a super article. And a guy named Brian Dean came up with this concept. But the super article consists of a blog article over 2,000 words in length. So you cover something ad nauseum past the point that anyone's going to want to read the whole thing. But it's all the information that Google could want. You have several questions and answers seated in there, which is great for keyword snippets in voice search. And then you accompany it with an infographic and with a video explaining it. And you bundle it all into a single page. And you've now given Google a comprehensive answer. And a lot of times those super articles will get you onto page 1 of Google for certain terms. Your whole site won't be there, but that one article on your site will be there, which is what you want, because from there, if you've offered good value within the article, they'll stay on your site. So that's a big opportunity for you as well. And the third challenge is tracking tangible ROI. Again, measuring what's actually working and what's not, and making sure that we're able to show results for what we're doing. And we actually start with this at Fidelitas. So this is in the kickoff meeting. That's one thing we do, is we sit down with every client and we figure out, okay, what actually matters for you? What's actually going to move the needle? And sometimes it's straight up sales, sometimes it's other things, and we're going to talk into some of the different ones. But it's important to get that out of the way up front. And by the way, for the brands of you in here, if you have an agency and you haven't made this clear to them, you can't be mad at your agency about what they're showing you or not showing you in a report. You have to make sure they understand, and there has to be a mutual understanding with what you're after and what's expected. And again, the other thing when it comes to metrics, there's tangible ones, and then there's the vanity metrics that don't matter as much, right? So it's easy to say, oh, our social audience is up 20% since January. Yeah, you went from 100 to 120 Facebook fans. Congratulations. What'd that do for your bottom line? You know, and that's part of the problem. It's easy to make any number sound good. In fact, 50% of all statistics are made up. So I'll let that one sink in. That right over some of you, but it's all good. It'll land before the session's over, I promise. So that said, if you're looking at vanity metrics, sometimes we have to do that. We consider that being a good partner at Fidelitas. Like, we understand that some of you all have bosses that want to see vanity metrics, and so we'll do whatever it takes to make our partner look good. If someone vouched for us to get us in, and by the way, agencies, you should be taking the same approach in here. If someone vouches for you to get them in, ask them what metrics matter for them with their reporting, and then decide together what metrics matter for the brand. And it's not one or the other, the answer is both. Because sometimes you all have bosses that want to see things and and have accountability for things that you know and we know don't really move the needle. Well, you still need to report on them for the sake of your bosses, but that doesn't mean you don't report on the stuff that actually matters. You tackle both and you prioritize both for the sake of the client. And to us, that's just being that's being a good partner. And when we talk about ROI, this is one of the common mistakes that we see, is it's based on top line revenue instead of actual net profit. So for example, I'm sure many of you have seen a report like this where, hey, we ran a Facebook campaign, we spent $1,000, we made $1,500 in sales, $500 profit, we're printing money, we should do this all day. One problem, you only have a 50% profit margin. So you actually lost $250 on that campaign when you look at it at the end of the day. And too many people fail to look at it at that level, and you've got to really reverse engineer everything that you're doing to figure out the true cost of doing business. So some of you with B2B brands especially, you have really complex sales cycles. Maybe once they get to a certain point, you have to fly out to them. That needs to be factored in. Like, we need to be able to calculate true ROI. You need to be factoring in what the average life cycle of a customer is. How much money are they worth over the course of their relationship with you. For example, we have a newer client with us that has a pretty complex sales cycle for order management software. And so for us, we're also figuring out, okay, well, if they're going to be with you for an average of 12 months at this price, we have a pretty high cost per acquisition to stay under, because it makes sense for them because they've got recurring revenue. So if you've got monthly recurring revenue, that changes the game, but you need to make sure that you're factoring in the sales cycle along with everything else. So you can factor out what the true profit is. And if you do that, you're going to be happier and your partners are going to be happier at the end of the day. And again, I've kind of been banging on this drum for a minute, but you have to be strategic and identify your goals ahead of time. You can't wait until the report comes in at the end of month one and say, oh, it wasn't really what I was looking for. Oh, well, maybe we should have talked about that before we started, right? So think about that for a second. Make sure that you're intentional. Before any of you in here ever hire an agency, you need to know what the heck you want at the end of the day. And that should be very clear from the get-go, because that should impact how an agency pitches to you. That should impact how an agency reports to you, and that should impact the work they do together. And that's one of the things we'll do when we're pitching, is we'll actually back up, because someone will come to us and they'll say, hey, we need email marketing. And we'll say, okay, great. Why do you need email marketing? And with email marketing, that's one of email marketing specifically, it's like, okay, you want email marketing because it's a hole in your gap, and going back to the whole task-driven approach, we need to check that box. Well, maybe if your goal is reach, then email marketing isn't the best way to go about it, because email marketing is just going to hit the people you already have. So that's where, again, it's important to make sure that you figure out what the heck you're after from the get-go. And a couple of things that you can focus on. Everyone knows sales. Sales trump all, right? At the end of the day, we're all accountable to sales. I love this quote from Michael Scott, for those of you in the back that can't see it. Make friends first, make sales second, make love third, in no particular order. So again, sales trump all, and sales cure a lot of things. In a struggling company, sales can mask over a lot of problems that you need to fix and buy you a lot of time. So we all should be tracking sales at the end of the day, even if the client insists, oh, sales aren't important. Trust me, sales are important. Everyone in here needs to be tracking sales, and make sure you integrate your marketing team with your sales team. That's another funnel we could have spent 45 minutes doing a deep dive on, and figure out what we're focusing on there. What's the parallel? You know, are the leads that we're generating good or not? You know, reach and branding is another goal. That's something else that a lot of people track. When you're talking reach and branding, you're bidding for things differently. You know, you're bidding on a CPM strategy, cost per 1,000 impressions, instead of bidding on a cost per acquisition strategy. It's going to change how you buy your Facebook ads, your Instagram ads, your Pinterest ads, your AdWords. Everything you do is going to be done differently when reach is your focus. And that needs to be communicated up and down the ladder as well, so everyone's on the same page with what you're trying to accomplish. And then list building. Again, I kind of alluded to it with email marketing. If list building is your goal, you're on a strict cost per acquisition strategy. It's about how to fit as many people as possible back into your sales funnel for later. And it's funny, you can't A/B test enough when it comes to this stuff. So to give you all one example, we were working with a client, publicly traded company, and we were on an investor relations campaign, and we were trying to capture a lot of email addresses for future marketing efforts. And so we were spending about $10,000 a day on AdWords to build this email list for them. And what we found is by installing a heat map on the landing page, and if you're not using heat maps, I recommend either Crazy Egg or Hotjar, or I believe HubSpot has some functionality for that as well. But make sure you have a heat map installed. We found that a lot of people were clicking on a logo on the landing page that didn't go anywhere. And so all we did was we turned the logo into a link to a pop-up with the email sign-up. The very same email sign-up that was right next to the logo. Okay, this wasn't groundbreaking UX or anything crazy, right? We doubled conversions overnight just by making that one subtle change. And that's why it's so important to listen to your customers at the end of the day. And if you're after engagement, again, test what works. It goes back to the Whiffum factor. The best thing in your arsenal is to understand what's in it for your customers and engage them in the conversation and to ask them questions. And if you do that, you're going to get the engagement that you're after at the end of the day. If you're after an increase in likes, shares, comments, et cetera, you know, maybe you're a bigger brand and you just want to have more interaction with your customers on social channels. And I want to leave you with a couple thoughts here. Number one is that the means should determine the method. When you're figuring out what to focus on at the end of the day, figure out where you want to end up first and then reverse engineer what it's going to take to get there. Oh, well, we want to increase sales by 15% this year. Okay, well, let's reverse engineer that. What's it going to take to increase sales by 15%? Well, we can probably upsell for 5% of that, and then we need to go get 10% new customers. Okay, well, what are our most effective channels, or what are our most underutilized channels where we can go get 10% of customers, and what needs to happen to do that? Do we need to do more event sponsorships? Do we need to have a bigger presence? Do we need to hire more people? Reverse engineer the whole thing to see if your goals are actually possible, but it's very important to it's very important to make sure that you have an overarching goal in mind, and those goals need to transcend the marketing department. I love this this thought from Patrick Lencioni. Talks about thematic goals in his book Death by Meeting, and some of his other ones. Jim Collins talks about BHAGs in the book Good to Great. Both are great reads. A BHAG, for those of you that don't know, is a big, hairy, audacious goal. And everyone's company should have a big, hairy, audacious goal that you're working to or working around. And that's great, but that needs to transcend the marketing department. It's the whole organization. And then it's our job as marketers to figure out what we need to do within our toolbox, within the tools that we have to help the company accomplish their BHAG. So that's where, again, as an agency, that's why we insist on having a seat at the strategy table, and we don't want to just be a vendor. We're not a here's your 5 Facebook posts. Do you want fries with that company? Because that's not what our clients need at the end of the day. They need strategy. They need guidance. They need someone to help them figure out how they're going to get from point A to point B, not the fastest way, but the best way. And finally, again, one thing we do a marketing podcast. We always try to leave everyone with one thing. In every podcast, it's a question we ask every guest. So my one thing for you all today is that results-based strategies bring strategic results. So if you're not getting the results that you want in your marketing, It's because you don't have enough strategy wrapped around it. So my ask of you would be to go back to the office tomorrow, unpack what you're doing, and ask the question of each thing that you're doing. Is this worth it? Is this moving the needle? Is this in par and online with our actual goals for the company? And if it is, awesome. You should probably amplify it. And if it's not, you should probably scrap it or figure out how to delegate it. And maybe that's something that's worthwhile to drop down for an intern or for someone else on your team to handle for you. So again, strategy drives all, and thank you very much for hanging out with me. Just a couple things. If you want to stay in touch or continue the conversation on Twitter, my Twitter handle is @Sickmeyer. Our website's fidelitasdevelopment.com, and like I said, we have a podcast if you want a bunch of free advice. Our recent guests include Alaska Airlines, Puma. We just had Evernote on, Snack Nation. We have all sorts of brands come on and talk shop. We've got a great episode that just went up with Rand Fishkin from Moz, for those of you in the SEO world. And we've got some other really great stuff coming up. That's all free. It's in Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Google, anywhere you listen. So happy to give you guys some free content. And thank you so much for hanging out with me today.